Hi, my name is Thomas Bryer. I'm a professor in the School of Public Administration at the University of Central Florida. And I'm also a visiting professor and Fulbright scholar at Kaunas University of Technology in Lithuania. I'm recording this today from Lithuania, and I'm happy and honored to be participating in this conversation with the Central Florida chapter of the American Society for Public Administration on ways to achieve social justice. The title of my talk today is Just a Citizen in a Just City, or a Just Citizen in a City Striving for Justice. I'm going to begin my talk with a story. A woman in her late 30s sat at the small table set up inside a demonstration and teaching kitchen in a low-income area on the outskirts of downtown Orlando, Florida. Orlando is perhaps most commonly thought of as home of the airport that is the gateway to the happiest place on earth, Disney World. As a Floridian myself, I love Disney. As a nearly 40-year-old man, I have no shame in running up to Chip and Dale, the rescue ranger chipmunks, or young adults dressed like Chip and Dale who are probably half my age, giving them a hug and getting my photo with them. Maybe 15 miles away from this magical place that fulfills fantasies of children and makes children out of adults is the demonstration and teaching kitchen. The woman sat with about 5 or 6 other people discussing the difficulty of healthy eating, the challenge of getting access to fresh fruits and vegetables, and the shameful amount of fast food restaurants in her neighborhood. Not long before the woman was sitting at this table, doctors amputated one of her legs due to complications with diabetes. The woman cried as she described her bad decisions and the lack of better options for living a healthier lifestyle. She was poor, overweight, undereducated, had probably never experienced Disney World, and she had one leg left. She wanted out. She wanted options. She wanted a future. Another story. A high school girl, maybe 15 years old, participated in a class project in which my graduate students partnered with a class of high school students in a low-income community. Their goal during the semester was to complete a needs assessment for the community and to think about how a new, fully reformed high school could serve as not only a place of high-quality teaching and learning, but as an anchor for the community. My graduate students conducted focus groups and interviews with the school and community stakeholders, and the high school students conducted surveys with students at the high school and with parents. Together, they analyzed all of the information they received and delivered a joint presentation to community leaders. One of the high school students wrote in a journal entry she delivered to me, saying, "Thank you for the opportunity to be part of the community school focus group process. I speak on behalf of Evans High students when I say we appreciate your efforts to try to make our school not feel like a school, but a home. And for that, we are grateful. We know that you do not have to do these things for us. Most people don't know us and don't know how great we can be and the things we can do or our talents and hopes and dreams that we hold. They don't know what we go through and the pain and struggles we deal with. Evans is my home. I walk these halls and I see my brothers and sisters fall. They fall into the temptations and cruelty of this world. I see how great and stunning they are, things other people will never see. So on behalf of my family, I say thank you." In these stories are reflected feelings of powerlessness, neglect, and invisibility. The people exist, but do not shape their existence. Take a moment to think about this. In the United States of America, home to a fairly radical adherence to a philosophy of atomistic individualism, the people, or at least the people lacking in material, educational, or financial resources, are unable to enact their individualism. In a sort of Platonic way, they are unable to pursue excellence in their lives and are relegated to a path determined before their birth. They are invisible and feel powerless, but we see in the stories that they are not without hope, or at least the desire to have hope. They see shadows of the world outside their impoverishment, but cannot take hold of the people, the places, and the resources that are casting those shadows. And they continue to live in the darkness of an isolated cave. My concern today, though, is not so much the people who are invisible and who are forgotten, whose independence is forsaken and agency long cast aside. My concern are the people who walk past the cave without peering inside. The people who ignore the entrapment of their fellow citizens, who have not enjoyed and do not enjoy the same opportunities for active citizenship as they themselves do. My concern is the people who walk away, in the story by Ursula Le Guin, the ones who walk away from Omelas. In this story, the citizens of Omelas enjoy an idealistic existence where the weather is beautiful, the people well-mannered, children well-behaved, music delightful, and all the ills of society such as crime, drugs, alcohol, they do not exist. All of this is true except for one child locked in a cellar somewhere, hidden from view. Occasionally, someone might open the cellar door, careful to not let light inside or the sounds of laughter from outside enter, and they'll throw food at the child or curse it or kick it. The rule in Omelas is that if the child is released from its terrible existence, the happiness in the rest of society will no longer be. Justice, in terms of equal opportunity, does not exist in Omelas, given the forced imprisonment of the child. One by one, the citizens, without speaking with each other, leave Omelas. They cannot bear the guilt of staying in a place and enjoying happiness where there is no justice. My concern is these people who walk away, who ignore the problem rather than engage it. The barrier to realization of a just society is the people who ignore the inequities and injustices happening around them and that are invisible to them, who walk past the homeless person and purposefully quicken their pace and avoid eye contact, or who read about the latest shooting in the nearby low-income neighborhood, but who, without further thought, close their newspaper and spend hours worrying about making their front lawn more green and beautiful. A Dutch student of mine in Lithuania recently asked a question about the story of Omelas. She asked, who is guiltier? The people who walk away from the city, or the people who stay and continue to enjoy the happiness built on the suffering of the child? Maybe a more realistic parallel, though not precise, is the person who crosses to the other side of the street when she sees a homeless person, or the person who walks directly in front of the homeless person while drinking an expensive cappuccino, cold brew, or flat white coffee. The person who walks away is guilty of acting on their guilt and their underlying sense of justice. Without some underlying sense of justice, she would be bold in continuing her life undeterred by the presence of misfortune around her. But she has a defined empathy, however selfish it might be, demonstrated by her creating distance between that which causes her guilt and her otherwise happy existence. She leaves the city or crosses to the other side of the street to avoid feelings of guilt, and for this, in thinking about justice, she is guilty. She does not act to correct the situation. On the other hand, the person who stays in the city or casually walks past the homeless person with an expensive coffee in hand is not guilty as such, but is demonstrably lacking in social awareness and empathy. She enjoys her happiness and takes no action to provide immediate relief to the suffering child or homeless person, nor any action to change policies or create projects that can alleviate or reduce suffering generally. This person is not guilty for failing to act. She is conditioned or socialized to feel. She is not conditioned, I should say, or socialized to feel the need to act. Both of these conditions are problematic for society. On one hand, we have citizens who are guilty for not acting to help a situation they know to be ethically unacceptable. And on the other hand, we have citizens who do not have awareness enough to find the same situation to be unacceptable, and who may even see the situation as normal and even necessary. Indeed, the very notion that societies should marshal resources to help the poor is a relatively recent notion in the history of world civilizations. For most of human history, the poor have been seen as a necessary condition for a stable society. Contemporary debate focuses on how the poor ought to be helped and less on whether to help them at all. Still, we have these two groups of citizens who either ignore what they know to be wrong or who do not see wrong in their happiness being maintained at the small or large expense of the suffering. Both demand solutions, but the solutions, from a citizen engagement perspective, are vastly different. My general position, though, is this. A just city requires citizens who are just. The vast majority of citizens will fall into one of the two groups and cannot be considered just, and so we must pursue at least three courses of simultaneous action. 1. Through education and socialization, develop future generations of citizens who are just. 2. Empower citizens who are just to use their voice and action to pursue the just city and the just society. And 3. Ensure our institutions of government, civil society, religion, media, and education are fully open to the citizens who are just to exercise their power, to persuade those citizens who are not just to act, and to develop those citizens who can become just. Let us first deal with citizens who ignore that which they know to be wrong. Maybe 10 years ago, a special guest came to my university to give a talk. Ralph Nader, well-known American consumer rights advocate. The room with space for 500 or so people was packed when I showed up 5 minutes before start time, dressed not as a member of the faculty, but more like a poor graduate student who had not shaved in a while. Yet somehow I managed a seat right in the center third row from the front. In the middle of his speech, Mr. Nader asked for a volunteer and pointed at me. I stood. He asked, "Who are you?" I answered, "Thomas Bryer." "Who else are you?" he asked. "An assistant professor here." "You are? Oh, okay. Who else are you?" "A son." "Who else?" "A husband." We ended the game before getting to the part about liking long walks on the beach and Disney's Chip and Dale. The answer he wanted above all other answers, citizen. Whether we are a professor at a public or elite university, a mechanic, a factory worker, a student, a full-time mother or father, etc., we are first citizens. Beneath the uniforms and fancy clothing of whatever our profession, we are citizens. Those who ignore a situation they know to be wrong have the potential to be citizens who are just. However, they may lack the skills, knowledge of tools, or confidence to act rather than to ignore. They do not have the capacity to be citizens first. To develop and empower citizens who are just, it is imperative that we as a society, through our various institutions, create moments for justice-oriented actions to occur. These start most simply with volunteerism, but progress to community organizing and finally political advocacy. A citizen driven to help can do so by, for example, helping to feed a few homeless people or mentor a child. Upon realizing that they alone can feed 10 homeless people in a day or mentor one child in a week, the engaged citizen concerned with justice will realize the potential of bringing 10 of her friends along to feed the homeless or mentor children, thus multiplying the impact. Eventually, these justice-oriented citizens will ask why there are so many homeless people or impoverished children struggling academically, and they will seek to change current laws or launch new projects to address the overall system that perpetuates injustice. The success of these advocacy initiatives depends on the openness of our governments to active citizens. Former United States Senator and Florida Governor Bob Graham wrote a book called America the Owner's Manual. It is a small book about the size and shape of a car manual. It is written for citizens who, in the governor's words, sometimes treat citizenship as a spectator sport. When asked by the Florida League of Cities to give training to municipal leaders on citizen engagement, I used this book as part of the training. I shared the core contents and asked questions. If even 10 or 20% of citizens in your city read this book and acted with the advice it provided, is your city ready? Most laughed nervously and uttered various phrases, all meaning, no way. This is part of the battle to develop and empower citizens who are just. They must find responsive institutions when they act. They must find willing partners in positions of authority who will provide space for justice-oriented citizens to argue their case and attempt to inspire the better angels existing within many of us. Developing and empowering citizens who are just is a time and resource-intensive operation that requires commitment from across sectors. More challenging is to transform those citizens who are blissful despite suffering and injustice around them. Here, we need partnerships across sectors. Universities must extend their reach beyond traditional boundaries to demonstrate the cost of not caring. Media must show the human stories of suffering that might lead to an emotional response. But the short-term response must be met with avenues of engagement that can be long-standing. Manipulating a typically uncaring citizen to give a small amount of money through their smartphone or text message does not solve problems. It uses citizens without developing deeper commitments to reform. Injustices remain, while small numbers of people are helped in small ways. In this talk, I have identified broad themes and considerations. Specific solutions and strategies from a civic engagement perspective are available and need more development and buy-in. And I hope you join me in Central Florida chapter of the American Society for Public Administration in discussing and debating these issues throughout the next several months. When we do not live in a socially engineered society that forces equality, or that through some selection criteria sorts citizens into tiers and places to fulfill various societal functions, the actions of the people determine the extent and quality of justice. When we live in a society that assumes free will and cherishes independence and agency, the goodness of the people, the justness of the people themselves is required to maintain vigilance and to continuously pursue a just city. A just city, a just society, is not a static state in a free land, where happiness competes with justice as a noble goal. We must be active citizens to debate the trade-offs that exist in a free land, without disparaging the views of others, but always striving for a place that is closer to justice for all. We cannot see ourselves as just a citizen living in a city that might be just. We must strive for more of us to be just citizens, constantly pushing our city to be that socially, environmentally, economically just place. Thank you so much.